What's happening, Heather? That's bored. Green light, yes,
Sir, I need more time.
We have no time. Are you going to give that order or not?
Sir, please.
You're too naive to see the truth. There's no bringing in born.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get the ticket law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan liberty for all. It is November 1st, 2016, and we're coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern on the Nonpartisan Liberty for All media and radio network, which now runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can listen live on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com to the live stream and to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. Of course, you can listen to the archives at any time, but you can listen to the newest show on the archives for most of those immediately following the show. It posts up there pretty quick. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote self-ownership and the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedoms, exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And in that, just so everybody is clear, I do consider myself anti-government and anti-police. Now, that doesn't mean I hate the people within the government. I don't really hate anybody. Hate, it has nothing to do with it. What they're doing is wrong, but there's no, I don't hate the government or the police. And when I say anti-government and anti-police, what I mean is that I don't believe they should exist. Now, that doesn't mean I don't believe that those people shouldn't exist. I believe that those positions should not exist. I believe in an organized society, but without rulers. So I should actually add that to my intro to clarify to people, because a lot of times, it depends what show you're listening to. And really, I try to cover a lot of different things that relate to the government, because I've said this before, you never know what is going to get to somebody. If you do a story on whatever, it could be anything. It might be something that might resonate with them and cause them to start questioning things. And that's the ultimate goal, because as I've said before, the truth is on mine and whoever agrees with me side, which I don't hear a lot of people that agree with me, to be honest. And that's why I mention Larkin Rose a lot, because he's really the only person that I hear that agrees with me. Now, it's not that he heard me and agreed with me. He was doing his stuff way before me. So I don't want to, I want to make sure that's clear. I've played his stuff, but And I've learned from listening to some of his stuff, kind of expanded on some things. But in general, I had most of those ideas before listening to Larkin Rose. It just so happened that I already had those ideas. But he was around way before I even had those ideas. But I didn't learn them from listening to him. Although I can say that he's helped me to think about more better ways to get the ideas out there, because he's great at doing that. He's a great speaker when it comes to talking about the government and the truth about the government and what it really is. And, you know, I've listened to everything on YouTube that he has out there that I could find for the most part. A lot of it's redundant because, like, when he does a speech, you know, he did like a tour, and this guy's a guy who's not getting paid. I don't think he got paid for any of it. He might have got paid for some of it, but if he did, it was like nothing. You know, it's not like he is making all this money or anything like that. They might have paid his expenses to get to wherever he was going to or something. And it's sad, because if he was anybody else, if he was talking about, if he was a Republican or a Democrat or a progressive or a socialist or any of those things, he'd probably be a millionaire. I mean, he's that good, and I don't want to sit here and kiss his ass. I only say that because I believe that. And I'm not somebody who gives a lot of props to anybody. I don't really... You know, there's stuff I like that people do. Very rarely now do I say I'm a fan of the person. And even with Larkin Rose, I mean, I don't know him personally. Mark Edge had asked him for me to come on the show during his retirement. And then it seemed like he was unretired, so he had asked again. And really... I was looking for his email address because Mark had copied me on it, and I was going to send him an email about playing his stuff, you know, doing like a Larkin Rose day and just looping his stuff, you know, just to get an okay from him, which I'm sure that would be no problem. But and then I thought about maybe asking him again to come on the show, but I don't want to rehash all the same shit that everybody else asks him and all the same questions and whatever. Now, I could come at it from a totally different angle, and I've tried to do that in the past with certain people. A lot of the people I had on were the first that I really got deep into their story, because I like to really get deep into somebody's story of how they got into stuff and whatever. But Larkin Rose is just so, from his interviews and all the shows he's been on, from his own speeches, I mean, there's just so much information out there on him that if I did an interview about, you know, how he found the ideas of liberty and went through his life and whatever, it probably, you know, wouldn't be all that great, because all that stuff is out there. So I'd have to come at it from a totally different angle. And it probably would be more of a, you know, do you want to come on and discuss stuff with me or something like that? But a lot of the people I did that interviews with, they've been on shows and stuff like that, and people know who they are. But I tried to get really into detail. Like, I did 2 to 3 hour interviews with some the people that would actually allow me to, and they were very interesting. And I kept going with where it took me and my own curiosity about them and how it related to freedom and liberty and stuff like that. And that's why I think if you look at some of the old interviews, even though the sound quality kind of sucks, some of them are very interesting. Now, I'm not saying I did a great job as far as I was, I think, a little stiff still. That sounds bad. But I mean, you know, as far as my voice and whatnot, but as far as the interviewee giving a really good interview, because I got deep into them personally and how it related to the focus of the show, that it was interesting, especially, you know, Daryl Perry of Free Talk Live and Ellen Ball / Stallone of I only laugh when I say that just because she's listed under Ellen Ball under the interviews, but she goes by Ellen Stallone, and I think she told me why. It's a long story. But anyway, she's the host of the Illumination Hour, which is on every Monday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. And people seem to really like the show. I think she does a great job, and she's very creative. And I think she's really happy with, now this is just, of course, my opinion from talking with her and listening to her show, is that she's happy with what she's doing now with her show. Whereas in the past, I think that she was on, you know, I guess it would depend on the show, but, you know, on Free Talk Live, she was kind of in the background. You had three hosts there. So she didn't have much control, although she did get a chance to add to stuff, and she did a good job. And then all her other shows were with co-hosts. And this one, she finally gets to do whatever she wants. And I don't interfere with that. I don't, you know, she produces that show. It was totally her idea. I don't, you know, really, I haven't said anything. Although she did ask me for my feedback, which I did want to give her, but I don't really have much any negative feedback that I can think of off the top of my head. She really does a great job, and I think that she helps bring more listeners to the network, and I think she gives something different for people to listen to, because it's still in the vein of freedom and liberty, but it's like an abstract. I can't even explain it. It's more abstract, and she puts a lot of creativity. Uses her creativity a lot within the show to just come up with all different types of things and ideas to talk about. And so if you haven't heard the show, at least, you know, check out an episode. You know, if you don't like it, you don't like it. Actually, I'm playing the whole, she's done 21 shows now. Her last show yesterday featured Andrew Mercer of Puke and the Gang, and that's a 2-part show. So next Monday will be the second half of that show. But I'm currently playing, as we're 24 hours, all of the shows. So we're in the middle of a marathon, I guess, of the Illumination Hour. So being that most people are not staying up 24 hours a day, I'm definitely going to play it for at least another day, because it's, you know, 21 hours of shows, plus I added some important clips in there. But getting back to, as far as people that I hear out there, before we get to our main topic tonight, which is teens and their rights, and how parents, I think, abuse their rights along with the government and the whole system, the system as a whole. And what happens is, when you're a teenager, you try to fight against the system. And then after you turn 18, or as you get, not even 18, but maybe, 21, and you kind of join the adult crowd and you don't give a fuck anymore, and you're like, hey, those annoying, teenagers. But for somebody like me, I think because of what I feel I went through as a teenager, I will never forget that. And I want to focus on, and I have in the past, I mean, we've done other shows where, not teens specifically, but, kids and kids' rights and stuff like that. And I want to focus on that because nobody fights for, especially teens. Nobody's fighting for their rights. Because again, I mean, they're probably, you want to talk about oppressed people when it comes to control. Maybe oppression isn't the right word, but when it comes to controlled people, teenagers are the most controlled. And at the same time, they have the mental capacity to realize it. It's not, when you're a younger kid and your parents are telling you what to do and all that stuff, most kids under 10 or whatever, they rebel a little, but not like teenagers do, because they feel like, hey, I know what I'm doing. Now, I'm not saying all teenagers know what they're doing, but they have the mental capacity to make these decisions, I believe. And I think as a parent, you should still help to guide those and be involved. But ultimately, I think it's up to them. And I know a lot of people are going to totally disagree with me and have in the past when I get into this. But it's one of those things that's like taboo to talk about, or that maybe not taboo, depends how, that's more, I guess, younger age kids, but to talk about, it's like talking about the police, like for politicians to talk about, the rights of teenagers and having more freedom and stuff like that. It's something they'll never talk about. They'll never mention, because what do they give a fuck? They can't vote for them anyway. So they could care less. Now, they are future voters, so they should think about that. But nobody gives a fuck about the rights of teenagers. And I'm talking about, 13 to 17, even really to, 21. But they care a little more when you're 18 because of the fact that you can vote. But most 18-year-olds don't vote anyway, as I mentioned. I never voted. I had that one sort of vote that I mentioned just to be completely honest, but it didn't really count. It was like a substitute. I was at a different polling place, and I really didn't give a fuck anyway. So, and that would be the only time, and that was 2012. So, yeah, I don't vote because the whole fucking system is rigged, and not rigged like Donald Trump says, rigged against Trump, like fake votes and shit like that. It's rigged, like I've talked about, by the media and the parties and whatever. So he's just like, oh, well, there's bias against me. It's rigged against me. Well, in a way it is, but it's not about you. It's about whoever's running against Hillary, because the powers that be want Hillary to get in there so they can go more towards a socialist, communist oligarchy where all the people on the top, all the powers that be, will sit on the top while everybody else lives in poverty, essentially. So, anyway, we'd be happy to hear from you. You can reach us via phone at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or you can reach us via Skype at Nonpartisan Liberty for All is the username. And also, sorry, I was reading I had a message on my phone. And why is it? Oh, because it's under her name. How the fuck do they do that? So these fuckers, I have my show phone is on my girlfriend's plan, right? So they send a message. I don't know how to get the number because the number is listed out there associated with the show. So she never wrote down the number on any thing or whatever. And it's I'll actually read this. So it says, "Hey, Katie, it's Paula, a volunteer worker to help mobilize young voters for clean energy candidates. Early voting is open in Nevada until November 4th. Voting earlier is a great way to avoid the long lines on Election Day. Can we count on you to vote for Hillary Clinton?" I should say, fuck you. And not that I would vote for Trump neither, because again, as I just said, I don't vote and it's rigged anyway. So I don't get whatever. I don't want to get into a whole thing on voting. You're one vote out of, when you're voting for president, which people think is the most important thing to vote for, but your vote counts the least. So anyway, especially with the Electoral College, I guess that kind of makes it count more in a way, the Electoral College, because if it was popular vote, it really doesn't count, but it still doesn't fucking, it counts more if you live in a smaller state. But if you live in a smaller state, they have less electoral votes. But the concept is obviously the less amount of people, the more say you have. But you don't have, you can't possibly have any say, even if it's just hundreds of thousands of people. It's just ridiculous. And even if somebody won by one vote, it's still, that doesn't mean anything. Well, they won by one vote, so see, that one vote mattered. I mean, it's just, it's all bullshit. It's all a fucking illusion. Anyway, check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. You can get all that contact information if you forgot the phone number or the username for Skype. And also links to our Facebook pages, other social media, articles, original articles and blogs and all of that fun stuff. Pictures of the police putting bruises all over me. And bruise is a, using the word bruise is, fuck, what's the word I'm looking for? I hate that when that always happens to me. Like, I'm thinking of a word and I can't think of the word that I'm thinking of. My mind just goes blank, especially at night after, you know, getting up at fucking 5:45 and working all day. And, but is, it's much bigger than a bruise. If there was another name for a giant bruise, I mean, it's just, my arm was ridiculous. So are, you know, other parts. But I mean, my arm, like from my elbow to it was just crazy. Anyway, the pictures are on there as well. But just to finish on Larkin Rose, he's the only person that I really feel that has the same ideas. Now, that doesn't mean we agree on everything, but I haven't really heard anybody talk about some of the stuff or a lot of the stuff that he talks about. Some of the stuff, yeah. And it seems like this is one thing that white supremacist, what's his name, or white nationalist or whatever he fucking calls himself, Cantwell, who's a conservative white nationalist or radical right, alternative right, whatever the fuck. I don't give a fuck what the correct terminology is, but that he, now I totally forgot what I was going to say. It was something to do with Larkin Rose, but that he had before, I think, said, you know, some of the things before he became a white nationalist that Larkin Rose said regarding you know, the police and being able to defend yourself against police and stuff like that. But I don't know what happened to him. He just went off the deep end. I actually respected him for the fact that he brought it up and nobody else would. And Larkin Rose had done that as well. And it's a conversation that needs to be had. Just because you're a government agent, you can just do whatever you want to people. So nobody else talks about stuff like that. Oh, the thing that he said, what I was going to say, is that a lot of the people in New Hampshire are more like progressive libertarians or whatever you want to call them, but they have a lot of those values. Now, they don't force it on anybody. So, because there's a difference. There's trying to force things on people through government and then just wanting everybody to be free to be their own person and make their own decisions. And that's what they are, but their not lifestyle, and I'm not saying all of everybody in New Hampshire and the whole Free State Project and whatever, but I'm saying there is a part of the Free State Project that is more progressive in their ideas. And I'm not talking about the people that, you know, what's that? I'm not talking about the polyamorist and all that shit. I mean, that's just more of, to me, you know, more of just freedom to do whatever you want to do, type thing, as opposed to, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but it's just more of the political correctness, really, that a lot of them are actually getting into political correctness. Now, not as this must be enforced by law, but there's less, I think, what people would call, and I hate labels like anarcho-capitalists, and I don't even like the word capitalism, anarcho-free marketist or something, I don't know. I just explain what I believe in and take it as you want. But anyway, I don't really see anybody that goes to that level that he does. So, and I'm, you know, I would say I go to that level. I just don't do it as well. And I try to cover all this different stuff where I think he has a smaller focus, which I think is in a positive way, because he's trying to explain the shit to people so they get it, explain the truth to people. And, you know, that's why I said there's a bunch of speeches that are similar, because, you know, he would tour and do speeches. But if this guy believed in anything else, again, he'd probably be a millionaire. But he's sitting out there struggling because he's doing it to get the ideas out. So I hope at some point he comes up with, you know, and I don't know how much money he has, if any, comes up with some way to make money off of what he's doing to support himself through that, because he puts I know a lot of time and effort into it. So anyway, I want to get to our topic for today. So before I get to anything, I saw something really disturbing. And actually, let me mention this too, which has nothing to do with today's subject, but I should have left more time for this. And that's why I used to do a 3-hour show, because, again, it's one time I kind of got a message from, it was only one person, and I think the reason why is because it was on YouTube and they didn't understand that, okay, this is a radio show. This is not a YouTube video about one thing. So at the beginning, you know, I did an introduction and maybe I talked for like 20 minutes before I got into the main topic, which I talked about the rest of the fucking show. But they got mad and sent a thing like, you took 10. Well, I think it was only 10 minutes, actually. I think I did it rather quick that day, and said, you know, oh, you took 10 minutes to get into this, you know, topic. And that's one reason why I sometimes hate putting the topics, even though I want to, because that's the main topic, which means the majority of the show is going to be spent on that topic. But it's a radio show, so it's not going to be 100% on that topic. Now, it may be, actually, if it's something that I really need to get into right away because there's so much to talk about on it. Occasionally I'll do that. But being that it's a radio show, it's not going to be, you know, it is what it is. I mean, I may go right into a topic. I may talk about a couple other things first. Usually with a radio show, even if you listen to, you know, one that's on the actual radio, they usually don't focus on one topic for one. I don't know how the fuck they get these ratings, some of these guys, because they're just fucking morons and say the same thing over and over and over every day. Like the guy who I talk about, the Constitution, Levin and Michael Savage and all of these guys. And now Alex Jones is blowing Trump or something going on with them. I don't know. And I just don't get it. So whatever. Alex Jones I got just because he'd come up with new information all the time, and he'd repeat a lot of the same stuff. I mean, you're on radio. There's only so much you can talk about, but there's so much, you know, I find so many things that are fucking going on, man, to talk about that relates to freedom. I don't know why these guys got to talk. Well, I do know, because they're you know, Levin and the Savage and these conservatives are you know, frauds. They're shills for the conservative. I don't know if you'd even call it a party, but whatever it is. And that's what they do. And they just try to pound these ideas into your head about the, you know, the conservatives. And you always hear, well, if it was a liberal, then it would have been like this. And it's just the same shit over and over again. Now, I'm not saying I don't talk about the same stuff or haven't talked about the same stuff, but I mean, they've done way more shows than me, so I got to give them that at least. But I went through so many different topics until I even got to similar topics, and you know, so there's so much to talk about that it's like, you know, the only reason for me to talk about the same thing is because you don't always have the same listeners, and there might be different people listening, and you want those ideas to get out there. So anyway, I just wanted to say real quickly that something that people might not know, that the U.S. is in a whole bunch of wars, essentially. They're bombing Yemen, Iraq, Syria. Well, everybody knows about Syria. Some people know about Iraq. Yemen is just a constant, like, they go in and they bomb people, and that's been going on for fucking years. I don't know how far that's going. And I guess there's like a war basically with Somalia, from what I understand. And that you never hear about. At least I never do. So they're just, you know, going after. I remember that whole plan that Wesley Clark talked about, that they're going to go after all these countries and destabilize them. And that's pretty much what they're doing. And I mean, a lot of it's about the petrodollar. I think the majority of it is about that, but it's also about their empire. and control, and, you know, not just controlling people here in other countries, but maybe the whole, you know, as much of the world as possible that they can control, and do it in a way that it looks like they're not doing it. Just like they do with the people in the U.S. They control everybody, and they do it in a way that makes it look like they're not doing it. They have people fighting for them that, and I'm talking about the people that live in the U.S. that will defend the U.S. government and get mad and yell at people like me, that got mad like when Colin Kaepernick didn't stand. And I guess that's a recent thing, too, that they never used to either come out for the national anthem or stand for it or something. But they get all mad. They have convinced, it's just so fucked up how they've convinced people of this whole lie, and they have people that are defending them, and it's just ridiculous. Okay, anyway, I don't want to waste any more time on other topics, but that's just interesting. You know, Somalia, I wasn't even aware of. I know that they supposedly, I thought they gave aid to Somalia, but, you know, they're fighting in Africa. They want the resources. So, or the same thing, they want to stop any, you know, I don't know how much oil and where it is and things like that, but they don't want anybody selling oil unless they're selling it in US dollars. And that's, if you're not, they're going to try to stop you. And you notice that whole thing with nuclear weapons and nobody else getting nuclear weapons, of course, benefits the United States, because they can't attack anybody who has nuclear weapons. And that's what it's about. It's not about peace, or because why does the United States get to have nuclear weapons, and Russia and all these other countries? Oh, we get to have them, but you guys don't. Nobody else can have. We made a rule that you know, you guys can't have them, but we can. So we can invade your country, and you can't do shit about it, which is pretty fucked up. So anyway, and that's a whole nother show, but which we've talked about some stuff like that before. But talking about teens, and we've kind of covered some of this before, and really as a whole, just kids and kids' rights, and done shows on that. But I want to focus on teens, because when I got into the shows about kids, it's really hard, and I've mentioned this before, it's hard to say at what age do you really, I mean, at a young age, I mean, kids are aware, they know what's going on. I mean, they're not stupid, but at the same time, at what point do you say you have the right to do whatever you want, or that? And I would really have no age of anything, to be honest, because it's the same thing. And I'll just mention this briefly because we're going to go into teens, but I wouldn't have an age that you're not able to, the restrictive age of 18. And the reason for that, to be honest, is, you know, no little kids are going to run away. And if they are, they're going to come back just like they would anyway. And they know they need to stay with their parents and all of that shit. And for the kids that, well, this is more when you get into teenagers, and that's what we're going to talk about. But if there was nothing that kept kids with their parents, meaning that there was no obligation, or there was no, or there was an obligation, but the kids could leave if they wanted to. Do you really think that would change anything? Now, I think it would change a lot when it comes to teens. And I think in a positive way. Because you have abusive parents, you have all this shit, and I've kind of talked about that before. But you have such restrictions on teens that most of the teens that it's so bad at home they leave end up becoming, drug addicts or prostitutes or stuff like that. But part of that is because they can't get a fucking job that would give them enough hours. I mean, if you're 15 years old and you want to work 40 hours a week, it depends on the state, I believe. I don't know what the federal law is, but I just remember from Massachusetts, you had to be at least 16 to work without a work permit. And if you were 14 or 15, you were very restricted on the amount of hours you could work. And I know that supposedly came from, all the shit in the fucking 20s. Well, we don't have that problem anymore. Or parents trying to force kids to work. But see, this is the whole thing, that having one law and getting rid of it, but keeping another law, it doesn't work. So in the sense that if you say that, okay, teens can work, if you're 13, you can work whatever you want and as many hours as you want and whatever. And you're worried about, well, parents are going to take advantage of that and make kids work and take all their money. But then at the same time, if you get rid of the law that says that they have to stay with their parents, then that eliminates that right there. Because then they can go stay with friends, they can rent a room. It's not, you don't have to make a lot of money to rent a room from somebody. So, there's things like that. And I'm not saying that 13-year-olds should be on their own. That's not my point. My point is that if you have a law because of another, it's like laws cause more laws. And the government loves that because they're in the business of laws. So if you have laws that you need to keep adding to, or you have a law that causes whatever issue or whatever problems, and it causes you to pass another law, that's a positive thing for the government, because it's like, hey, we got to pass another law. And again, they're in the business of making laws. And we had another issue that, look, we resolved. We did something positive, and they look at it that way as well. So anyway, there was a girl, I was watching or listening to it was juveniles in jail or something like that. And I couldn't believe the shit that they were in jail for. I mean, the culture, and I thought I need to do another show on prisons. I've done shows on prisons, but it's just ridiculous. And that's why I say how much I disagree with the system. Even if somebody's a murderer, I disagree with the system. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think that murderers, and especially rapists, and the serious criminals should be locked up. Of course, the percentage of that is pretty low. But at the same time, it's like, even I think they're treated unfairly. So, but before I get to this girl, what she did and what the year she got was crazy. But there was a woman. First, I ended up watching some prison, or listening to some prison show or a documentary. And she was 25. She said she shot somebody because he was a snitch, but that he was reaching for a knife, and she claimed self-defense. Now, that's her version of the story. Who knows what happened? But say she did, just shoot him. They had a confrontation and she shot him and killed him. She got life. And I think that is insane. Because I don't see, if she got 20 years, and I'm trying to think and put myself in the shoes of the family or the, I don't know. And I think it was a 16-year-old actually, and that might have contributed to it. But she was 24. I mean, she wasn't that much older, I guess, 8 years older. But I mean, at 24, you're still pretty young too. So she could have been even younger. It could have been 23 because she was 25 at the time. She had been in jail for a year, and then you get to trial and all that. So she could have been like 23. I mean, I didn't see, even though the government's arbitrary age of 18, he was under that, but I don't know that that's, if the kid was like 10 or something, okay, I see a difference, but I don't see really much of a difference. Because if they were 2 years older or maybe even a year and a half older, then it would be totally different, which is ridiculous, this arbitrary 18. But anyway, so she killed him. And again, I'm sure he had a mother. But I mean, the stuff that she was into, I'm assuming that this was not somebody, and really she wasn't into anything that bad. I think she was just doing and selling drugs. And for that, you shouldn't be in jail. But she's not in jail for that. She's in jail for murder. So for murder, you should be in jail. Although, again, not in the way things are now. But you should definitely be, there should be a long punishment there for taking somebody's life that you can't bring back. However, to give the girl life in prison at 24 years old, I think in that circumstance is crazy. I mean, I look at it as almost like a gang shooting. And again, I mean, she could have been telling the truth as far as what happened, that she thought, if she was a cop, she'd get paid vacation, but because she was a drug user or a drug dealer, she gets life. But the fact that she got life, and it wasn't like she got a life sentence, 15 years. Like they said that she was going to be in prison for the rest of her life. You know what I mean? Because there used to be, and I don't know if this has changed. I haven't followed what a life sentence is, but depending on what state you were in, a life sentence was like 15 years or something. Like they'd say, a life sentence wasn't really your whole life. It didn't mean you were in jail for life. And I don't know if she got life without parole because they didn't say that, but they said that she would be in there for the rest of her life. Now, maybe she can get parole, but there was this other woman who was in there for 32 years who had broke into a house and robbed somebody and killed them to get money for drugs. Now, don't even get me into that because, of course, if drugs were affordable and not illegal and cost so much money, it'd probably be a whole different story there too, but maybe not. Maybe she was just, it wasn't just the drugs that made her because there's plenty of people that do drugs that don't, rob people at gunpoint as well. But just being in jail for 2 days waiting to get bailed out, and I was in just the county jail, and it's just horrible. Now, I had some other stuff going on that I was stressed out about at the time. It wasn't like people knew where, like, there were just things going on. Like I didn't know where my car was and if it got towed, and my cat was at home and I was worried about my cat starving to death. I mean, I'm sure I'm saying this and people are like, that's nothing compared to their problems. But I was in the middle of, I had just applied for a job, and I got it as long as my background check came back fine. And I was worried about that. And am I going to get fired? And because it was a bullshit charge anyway. But it wasn't just the worrying about things, although I'm sure that made things a lot worse. It was the whole experience and just being in a fucking cell, man. And the food, I didn't even eat anything in there. I ate a roll because it just looked so fucking disgusting. And I'm like, there's no way, I should be out of here soon. And I had paid bail and still had to wait. And they do all that shit on purpose just to fuck with you. And I've talked all about this before. But my point being is just how bad jail is. People don't understand that, have never been in jail. And before that, I'd just been in, holding cells at police stations. But people that have never been in jail, and I was barely in jail, they don't realize, just having your freedom taken away in the first place. Now, maybe people that don't feel like they have much to live for and don't give a fuck anyway, and they don't have much of a life, meaning, they're just out in the streets selling drugs or whatever, which again, I think should be legal. So I don't have an issue with that, but they end up in jail and they don't care because they don't have any obligations or anything like that or whatever, which usually a lot of people do have family obligations like kids or a wife or whatever. So they care, I think, about that part of it. But as far as, a career or whatever. So, those are things that I had obviously worried about as well. But at the same time, to put somebody in jail for for life, I would, if she was in jail for 20 years or 15 years, to me that seems, or 15 years and then they review her case and for parole or something and give her 20 years. I mean, there was somebody that I know not well, but that, of course, made a plea deal. And maybe that's why. Maybe she went to trial. And I think she did. And that's probably why. And that's another issue with the fucking justice system, the injustice system. Because she said that she claimed self-defense, so she might have went to trial. So they might have offered her a plea deal of like 10 to 15 years or 20 years or something like that. And she said, no, I'll go to trial. And they gave her life. Because that's happened to people as well. That in the case I was talking about, the person I knew, there was another person who I actually knew a little, and he didn't even pull the trigger. And he went to trial. They offered him, I think, like a plea deal for like 8 years or something like that. Or maybe not even that long. And he was like, no, I'm going to trial. And he went to trial and got life. So the whole system is fucked up. They don't want you to go to trial because they can't handle it. If everybody went to trial, the system would fall apart. They wouldn't have enough. And that's what everybody should do, because the whole fucking injustice system wouldn't be able to handle everything, and in the majority of shit that happens, they would just drop, because they drop all the drug stuff because they know it's all the nonviolent shit would get dropped because they couldn't handle it. They wouldn't have the time. That's another way to, there are ways to bring down the system, but you just need a lot of people to do it. And that's the problem, getting the people to do it. If everybody went to trial, it would bring down the system, or at least it would let all those people that shouldn't be going to jail or shouldn't be charged with a crime, period, drug users, drug selling, possession, all of that stuff, all the nonviolent crimes, they'd all get dropped because they, what are you going to do? You're going to still go after them when you have actual real criminals, murderers and rapists and people that are, beating people within an inch of their life and, things like that. So, there are ways to help bring down the system, but it's not by using the system. I wouldn't consider that, using the system is, legislation and stuff like that. But anyways, so there was a girl who was a juvenile, and she was charged as a juvenile, I believe. Maybe they charged her as an adult. But so, and she was 17 years old. She's actually very pretty. And they charged her with, I guess what happened was her and her friends went to somebody's house that they knew. This is so stupid. I don't even know why they did this, because obviously she's going to get caught. They went, she knocked on the door of somebody she knew, and then her friends were behind her, and one of them had a gun, and they stole the person's TV. And of course they're idiots, and they left prints in the snow, and the police arrested them and whatever. But the fact that this girl got 10 fucking years for that is insane. I don't even know that she should have went to jail, to be honest. Over a TV, because her friends robbed, she got a lady to open the door so her friends could rob somebody for a TV. Really? That should be jail? How about you fucking buy her another TV and, you work a job for the state or something, whatever, that, and replace our TV with a brand new one or something, and pain and suffering. I mean, really, money to replace the TV. In her case, I guess the guy with the gun, and they really didn't even break in. I don't get that. And this is in I guess Michigan City, Indiana. It was in a documentary. The girl's name was Selena Briggs. And I feel so bad for her because, assuming that that's totally what happened, and I believe it is, and the fucking 10 years. And she's 17. So they put her in the juvenile place. They have these juvenile jails now that they call like schools, because they try to rehabilitate and send kids to a school like environment and all of that shit. But there's just so many kids that are in there that have done things that you shouldn't be in jail for. I don't get the jail culture. We've talked about shows on kids in school that are getting arrested all the time. Not the same kids, but I mean, all these arrests going on at schools, and how kids end up getting arrested just for something stupid like was the kid who drew a gun. I don't know if he got arrested, but there's like ridiculous shit. And I'll actually play some clips of that in a moment. But these jails were just full of, I mean, now granted, some of the kids should have been there. There was one kid though, who accidentally shot his friend, was in there for 3 years. I didn't get that one when it was an accident. And of course they throw that in there, you know, to show, oh, look, guns are evil, whatever. They got to throw one of those in there. And I wasn't surprised at all that they followed a kid that, you know, did that. But they never mentioned, you know, this kid, think about this, that this kid has to live, it was his friend, and he thought the gun wasn't loaded, and he like joked around and pulled the trigger. This is what they say happened. And the kid died. But there was no intent. There was no, and you could say, well, that's why he only ended up doing 3 years. But what is, should he have done any time if it was an accident? What does that do? That doesn't bring him back. And this kid, for the rest of his life, is going to think about it. I mean, you could see that he seemed like a good kid. I mean, I just saw him in a documentary, but I know if I did something like that, it would always be there in the back of my mind that, you know, I killed my friend. It wasn't even somebody, it's not like he killed somebody he didn't like. I mean, it was one of his friends, and he was just, I don't know. So I don't, isn't that punishment enough? And then again, you try to put yourself in the shoes of the family, but what does that do? If you look at it, and as far as the family goes, knowing that somebody's in jail, which is a horrible place, that the government, I mean, this cruel and unusual punishment, they should take that. I mean, they just totally ignore that because cruel and unusual punishment exists. Now, the juvenile places weren't as bad. So I do see that, you know, and they tried to help the kids and it wasn't as bad. But that was because the two that I listened to, one was in Indiana and one was in Arizona. And in Arizona, I guess it was because they had recently redone the whole fucking system because it was so bad how the kids were treated, and they wanted to turn it into more like a school-like environment and try to help the kids, supposedly, is what they said. Because, you know, most of the kids were in there for things that weren't that bad, and none of them really were like did any murders. The only person who had killed somebody was that kid, and that was an accident. And they, you know, they were just kids getting in trouble. I mean, there were kids in there for, one was in there for disorderly conduct. Now, she had other stuff, but it was like, you know, drugs and just stupid shit that shouldn't even be illegal. Just because you're a teenager, if it was an adult, they might even get off, actually, or they would go to jail. I don't know, and they go to a worse place. But I think with kids, they look at it differently. In the sense, well, you have, I guess it's a double-edged sword, because in some ways, if you're tried as a juvenile, you're not going to get the same punishment as an adult, where it depends when it's a serious crime. But it seems like for the smaller crimes, that they want to put you in jail to like try to rehabilitate you if you're older and you get arrested for some of these crimes. It's like fines or whatever, or you go to jail, but you go to less time. It's weird. Because they want you to be in jail so they can basically brainwash you. If you're a kid, if you're an adult, they probably think that, well, not totally, because they want to put a lot of adults in jail too. They wanted to put me in jail over something ridiculous, having no record in the state of Nevada, and basically because they claim I said I wouldn't get out of my car on private property to a cop. Based on that, I should go to jail. It's insane. And that's not even what happened. But anyway, we'll take a quick break to play some clips, and we'll be back to talk more about teens and their rights. And you can, of course, check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. The number and the username Skype, which is also Nonpartisan Liberty for All, is there. So the number again is 702-470-7664. So if you'd like to call in, and we'll be right back after this, after these clips. NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com.
A girl allegedly dates and is getting married to her dad. Okay, there's so much to this interview that has circulated the internet, social media. It's become quite the controversy. There are a number of different questions from the interviewer and answer from her that I want to read. I want to also talk about a term called GSA, and GSA is a term for genetic sexual attraction, in which, let's say you were abandoned by your parents, your biological parents, or let's say you were adopted and then you get reunited with them later on. There's this study that suggests that there will be some very sexual romantic feelings.
Half the time.
Yes, half the time, but it also has like really scarce research too. We'll get into all that. There's so much here that I feel like that I'm going to touch on it and also talk about the Q&A interview after our 5 words.
Daddy's little girl friend.
To each his whole.
Who is your daddy and who does he do?
Daddy's screwing her, literally, figuratively.
Oh, that is disturbing to hear.
Okay,
Whoa.
So let's talk about this interview. Here's 2 of the questions from the interviewer. 1, so can you remember when it was like the moment you and your dad were reunited? Was there an instant attraction? She says, it was so weird and confusing. Mind you, she's 18 years old right now. Okay, I was seeing my dad for the first time in forever, but it was also like, he's so good looking. And then I was like, what the hell are you thinking? What is wrong with you? I saw him as my dad, but then also part of me was like, I'm meeting this guy who I've been talking to over the internet. They reconnected on Facebook and really connecting with, and I find him attractive. They had not seen each other for 12 years.
This
okay?
ruins the song For the First Time in Forever for me. Because she said, I was reading it, it's like incest, and it's like, for the first time in forever, I'm having sex with my dad.
Okay, let's talk about that, because that's the next question, and then we'll talk. Was there a single moment you realized that you were sexually and romantically attracted to your dad? She said that after they'd been talking, she went and stayed with him for 5 days. On the 4th day, they started wrestling, and she had bit him in a playful way, and she got goosebumps. He pinched her in the thigh, and he got goosebumps.
Yeah.
So then she says, quote, we stopped and said that we didn't know what was going on, but admitted that we had strong feelings for each other. We discussed whether it was wrong, and then we kissed, and then we made out, and then we made love for the first time. That was when I lost my virginity. Then the rest of the interview talks about how they fell madly in love. She's keeping it a secret from her mother and her side of the family. He told his parents, so her grandparents, her on the dad's side, they've given their blessing. They want them to have children. He had a girlfriend the whole time. She heard them making love, but has accepted their relationship as well. And that's where it all ends. And they're going to go get married and have a life in New Jersey where it's not illegal to have adult incest.
With so many parents packing their kids off to college right now, it's natural for both sides to feel a little separation anxiety. But Chris Conley's been following a new phenomenon. Mothers whose apron strings reach all the way to college dormitories. From doing laundry to wake-up calls, they're confusing letting go with never can say goodbye.
It's a new school year, and that means college kids are about to learn a big lesson from their techno-savvy parents. You can run, but you can't hide.
Dad, cool it with the Twitter updates, okay?
I'm sitting on the patio.
I know you're sitting on the
As these Verizon ads spoof, media mad moms and dads are texting, tweeting, even friending their college freshmen on Facebook, eager to stay close to their kids long after the minivan has pulled away from the dorm. Those who felt the power of parental omnipresence include Ethan Lewis and his brother Brendan.
Hello?
Hi. How was poli-sci this morning?
Mom?
Hey, I just got your email. Hello, Bren.
Hey.
How did the human geography quiz go? Hi, Ethan.
Hey, what's going on?
You don't have class on Thursday at 1 o'clock?
Hello?
Hey.
Hello?
Hey.
Hello?
Are you having trouble with the phone?
No, I had it on vibrate.
You should take it off vibrate unless you're in class so that you can hear me.
Robin Lewis is a single parent who homeschooled her sons. And just because Ethan and Brendan are out of the house and she's taken on a full-time job, that doesn't mean she's losing interest or hour-by-hour involvement in her boys' lives. Every single day, like this one.
Hi, Ethan. It's Mom. It's 9:10, and I know you have class at 9:30.
Later, she makes another call to Ethan.
Hi, Ethan.
Hey, what's going on?
I'm good. How you doing? Did you just get out of class?
She checks an email from Brendan.
History quiz is going to be on the first 13 chapters.
Sends an email to Ethan with his fall schedule.
105.
Makes another call to Ethan.
What are you doing this afternoon?
I have to meet some people at 5.
Socially?
No, studying.
Oh, study group?
Study group, yeah.
Then she calls Brendan.
Are you going to be able to get that math thing for me?
I'm going to do that today. Like, I have a few things that I'm...
Well, why don't you call me after human geography and let me know how the quiz went?
All right, we'll do.
Your American Lit class, because it goes to 3. Need to register.
When she's not talking to her boys,
and you're doing so much. And
Robin's organizing their lives. She spends an hour drafting to-do emails for her sons.
He did so well on
checking their grades.
98 out of 100 on his history essay.
Checking their bank accounts.
And it looks like Brendan's going to need a few dollars for the weekend.
Even using their personal passwords to check their student email.
Something about a conference reminder.
Her tools of the trade include this stuffed purple folder.
I've made notes that he's going to be graded on 10 quizzes, a book review, 1 exam, midterm final, and I even check off each week as we go.
Even a dedicated cell phone just for the boys' calls.
And this is the hotline. One of the boys calls me at 10:20, and I can say to them, wait a minute, you can't be calling me now. You're supposed to be in history class. And then they'll go, oops.
Robin works tirelessly to keep those oops to a minimum. She proofreads her son's papers at lunch. And Brendan and Ethan both say they're grateful for their mom's efforts on their behalf.
She wants to make sure that I do it well, and it's all because, she cares, which is great. Because, then it's like I don't have to make a list, and I can just print it out, and it's there. So it saves me a lot of time.
In the wellness dorm?
It's nice to have someone else that's kind of serves as maybe a secretary mom.
One of your sons, I think, referred to you as like a secretary mom.
Well, I think that's great. It means that I'm very organized. Would that be ready by Saturday? A secretary helps to keep the boss focused and organized, right? We don't know how to balance much of our lives yet when we're 18.
No one could deny Robin loves her sons and wants them to succeed. Not everyone thinks that she's helping them.
I can understand why a parent would think I'm just doing what I think is right for my son or daughter. The problem is they're doing exactly what's wrong for their son or daughter.
Helen Johnson, author of the book Don't Tell Me What to Do, Just Send Money, is a consultant on parental relations for some of America's top universities. She says parents like Robin are far too involved in their children's lives.
In taking over, they are sending a profound message. You are not capable of handling your life.
Financial aid office.
Helen Johnson is more than familiar with the term in vogue to describe someone like Robin, a helicopter mom.
A helicopter mom is a mom who hovers over every stage in her child's development, from basically now in utero through the college years and beyond.
Administrators say helicopter moms and dads have become a campus phenomenon. To harness the influx of eager parents, 96% of colleges now have orientations designed just for mom and dad. 70% of schools have so-called parent coordinators. Some campuses have even added Hi Mom cameras, where parents can hover from thousands of miles away. But Robin Lewis says she doesn't hover, she helps. She even drives 2 hours to Ethan's dorm and twice a month does his laundry.
Did you check all the pockets? Make sure nothing's in the pockets?
She shops for his groceries.
Wow. Looks like I have a lot of cleaning to do.
Picks up his dorm room. She even does the dishes.
Isn't it time for him to say, yeah, I don't like it like this, I'll clean it up, or to live that way?
And he'll tell me that. He'll tell me that. I think that's probably more coming from me, that I just want to tidy up. We don't need any green tea.
Robin is justly proud of the artistic and intelligent children she's raised.
She's like the most selfless person on the face of the planet. I mean, she just, will give and give and give and give and give. And when she's, got nothing left to give, she'll keep giving. I know you put it up before, but... She has succeeded in every aspect of giving my brother and I everything a kid can ask for.
But for Robin, letting go can be the hardest thing of all, because the lists and the calls don't just help her sons, they help her stay close to them.
These habits are very hard to break, and I know I'm still doing them. I'm trying to wean them off more and more so that they can become more self-reliant.
But you don't want to do that, do you? You want to talk to them 3 times a day. You want to make the to-do lists. You want to read their books. You want to read their papers.
I want them to be able to become their own person as long as we stay close. And I don't want to feel that all of this, micromanaging mothering crippled them in any way to not be able to relate to other people.
In fact, Robin says her relationship with her sons has evolved from constant monitoring to close friendship. Ethan, she says, dropped out to pursue a career in music. Brendan, armed with a degree with honors in global studies, is traveling the world. Robin believes her parenting style has made her sons uniquely independent. Yet she still emails, IMs, and calls, and knows that one day she'll face an even greater separation.
Together again. And of course, when they get married, that's I'm not going to be the most important person there, and I know that. Of course I know that.
You know it, but how does it feel?
You go through a period of withdrawal, and then hopefully you get to be best friends with their wife, and you have a good relationship, and then she'll call you and tell you what he's doing.
To whom does your life belong? Who owns you? Most people instinctively answer, I own myself. But most people don't actually believe that. What does it mean to own something? It means that you and you alone have the right to decide what is done with that thing. What is yours you can use, you can trade, you can give away, you can destroy. So what does it mean to say you own yourself? It means that you and you alone have the right to decide what is done with your body and your mind, with your time and your energy. If someone else had the right to decide what is done with your body and your mind, your time and your energy, then he would be your owner and you would be his slave. So, are you anyone's slave? Do you pay taxes? Do you feel obligated to obey whatever the politicians decide to call law? Do you imagine that someone else has the right to control you, to rule you? Do you vote? In every political election, you are asked to decide who you want owning you, but owning yourself is never one of the options offered. The only choice you are given is the choice of which politicians will coerce and control you by way of so-called regulation and legislation, and confiscate what you produce by way of taxation. Whoever wins, you will be extorted and dominated. When you vote, whether you win or not, you are accepting that someone else has the right to rule you. You are conceding the state's authority over you. You are agreeing that you are going to be someone's slave, with the only question being which political master will own you. If you believe that you have an obligation to pay taxes, If you concede that it is up to someone else to decide how much of your earnings they will let you keep, then you are their slave. If you own yourself, you don't need the permission of anyone, any individual, any group, any collective, any country, any legislature, to run your own life, make your own choices, and keep the fruits of your own labor. As long as the politicians see you voting, petitioning, protesting, and campaigning, begging for tax cuts, whining for different legislation, as long as they see you timidly obeying whatever commands they issue while begging them to change their so-called laws, then they know that they own you in mind and body. Writing or calling your congressman merely tells him that you still think he's important, that you still view him and his fellow parasites as authority, and that you still think it's his choice whether to let you be free or not. As long as you play their games and legitimize their system, obeying their so-called laws and paying their so-called taxes, acting as if they are your rightful lords and masters, the tyrants know they have nothing to fear. The slave master doesn't mind his slaves pitifully begging for mercy, as long as they keep obeying and keep producing wealth for the master to steal. Those in power aren't worried about elections or petitions. What they do fear is that one day their victims will realize the truth, will stop believing in the divine right of politicians, will stop calling liars and crooks lawmakers, will stop calling the tyrants, mercenaries, law enforcers, will stop believing that anyone has the right to rule them, will stop imagining authority where there is none, will realize that they own themselves, and will stop bowing to the parasitical, anti-human beast called government. If you own your time and effort, and the fruits of your labor, then stop asking nicely to be allowed to keep it. If you own yourself, then stop asking nicely for legislative permission to run your own life. If you actually believe in unalienable rights and individual liberty and freedom, then stop asking nicely for the sociopathic parasites to let you be free. For humanity to be free, people need to stop thinking, talking, and acting like slaves. Stop bowing to megalomaniacs. Stop paying tribute to sociopaths. Stop obeying political parasites. If you truly understand that you own yourself, then start acting like it.
West Side. The world is mine, nigga, get back. Don't fuck with my stack. The gauge is whacked.
Nonpartisan liberty for all, and we are back. A lot of information, I guess, in that. Well, not a lot of information, but a good example of what they're calling now helicopter parents, and that had to do with college kids. So, being that, of course, I believe, excuse me, I think I burped there. Being that I believe in the principles of freedom, if the kids are okay with it, then, you know, I guess that's fine. But we're talking about a different level here, because in that, and I had played that just because, well, one, I have so many different fucking clips, and I found that one, and I wanted to play a helicopter moms. I didn't realize that was about college, but they're of age where they have a choice. So I don't know how that mother was when they didn't have a choice. And it's kind of like a boss-employee relationship in that, not at their level, although if their parents are paying for college, it is. And I mean that in the sense of your boss has power over you, and you realize that. You realize that they could change your life and totally fuck it up by just firing you. Maybe or not. I mean, if you, depending on what you have for savings or whatever, but unless you're independently wealthy, it's still going to affect your life. Or you can find a job like really quick. But for the most part, they have some power over you. So you may feel obligated when it comes to certain things. So it's kind of the same thing in that, one, you know, bringing your kids up over a period of time in a certain way, they're going to feel like that. And if you're paying for their college, well, there you go. That's why when it comes to any relationship, if you control the money, it gives you some control over that person, whether you take advantage of that or not. And hopefully you don't. So I don't know if they were paying for college or not. And that's a little different because they could say, look, you know, and I think this happens a lot with rich families too, where, and I was going to say they could tell the parents, you know, leave me the fuck alone. But they actually said that they liked it and whatever. And maybe they did and they were being truthful, but maybe they didn't and they felt obligated to say that based on how they were brought up and the fact that possibly their parents are paying for college, very likely. It sounded like it sounded like a family that, and this sounds kind of weird. How can you tell from listening to that? But it sounds like a family where they were helping them, at least helping with college. Whereas in my situation growing up, you know, I was very independent from, you know, the beginning, really. I came out independent. I was like, fuck this shit. No, but I mean, since I was like a little kid, I was pretty independent and very, when I didn't agree with something, and very stubborn, and I would stand up to my parents if I disagreed with them. Now, in general, I was quiet and shy until something came up that I totally that I disagreed with, and that frustrated me. Especially if something frustrated me, that's when I would flip. But if it was, you know, I agreed with things, you know, I was fine. It's just like I remember in high school, you couldn't wear hats. And this is one of the ridiculous things that it all fits in with what we're talking about. That they make rules just to make rules because you're a fucking teenager and they're going to tell you what to do. And they want to teach you discipline. And I was even listening to an interview with some guy who wrote some fucking parenting book. And I wish I had the name because I think he's a moron. Because he made a statement that they would say, oh, well, back in the day, you know, you just smack a kid in the mouth when they disrespected you. And they were like laughing about it. Like, that's funny. Is that really funny? Seriously? I mean, I got hit pretty hard. I got punched. My father would say, if he was still alive, that no, I never beat you up, you know, or whatever, that he held back. And I think most of the times, not every time, but I think when he threw punches, that he may have held back, or the times that he didn't, I was able to cover myself up enough that I didn't get that hurt. Or, you know, I got pretty tough later on where I could take a beating, but by that time he really wasn't hitting me anymore because he was worried about, you know, he had a bad back and he was worried about me hitting him back. Because probably if a fight lasted 30 seconds when I was growing up, because he was always bigger than me, I was always pretty skinny. If the fight lasted 30 seconds, he would probably win. If I was able to last the first 30 seconds, I would probably win because he'd run out of breath and I could hit him in his back or something. And not that I'm talking about this in a way that like this is what I wanted to do. I'm just saying that. And the last time he actually punched me, I was 17 and my nose started bleeding. Now, I don't know. He kind of threw a punch like over my mother, sort of. So I don't know if he threw it as hard as he could because could he knock me down with one punch? I mean, I weighed 140 pounds. Probably if he threw it as hard as he could and I wasn't ready for it, but I knew he was going to throw a punch and my mother kind of tried to break it up. So it's possible that he did like try to throw it as hard as he could and he didn't connect full strength because my mother kind of, tried to grab his arm sort of, or gotten away a little of his arm with her arms. And he still punched me hard enough where my nose started bleeding. And that's the last time he actually hit me. When I was 21, he pushed me and threatened, like, he's like, if I wasn't in the shape I was in, I'd kick your ass. So once I got to a point, and when I was 17, I was getting, that's when I started fighting in junior high. And I wasn't the toughest person. And I know there's a lot of people, if anybody's listening, that I went to school with. And it will, some people will have different opinions. I wasn't the toughest person, but I would fight most people if they fucked with me. There was a period, and people don't realize this, because if they fucked with me during this period, I got so scared because when I was 14, I got arrested and I was on probation, and the system just it really fucked me up. And when you're a kid and you don't know your rights, and of course they don't teach you them and all of this stuff, the system, that's what they try to do. They try to scare you and shit. So during that time I was on probation, if somebody, fucked with me, as long as they didn't, try to hit me, I didn't really say anything because I didn't want to get, I knew if I got if it was at school, at least, I didn't say anything or get in a fight with them because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, the probation officer might find out and, I'm not gonna go to no fucking juvenile jail and shit. So, and not that I was scared actually because jail is a juvenile, as I was just talking about, it's not the same thing. But it was just like the thought of being locked up and having your freedom taken away. I don't know what was going through my head. I knew I didn't want to go to jail at the time, but I don't know exactly what I was thinking. Anyway, because really when I think about it now, the juvenile jail, I probably wouldn't have given a fuck. Compared to, the jail. And I don't know how bad it was back then or the details or whatever, because I never, when I get arrested as a juvenile, like I was saying, you just sit I would be in the jail at the police station. And see, the difference in Massachusetts, at least back then, as opposed to the extortion that's going on in Nevada when it comes to bail, is your bail. And you know what pisses me off too, and I know I'm changing the subject, but I'll get right back to it, is I watched that show about the Clark County Jail. They had a show, and they were releasing all these people on personal recognizances, right? So I get arrested for something that's not even a crime, number one. Like it got dropped 3 days later. I said this before. I got a letter from the DA and said, we're not pressing charges, because even the DA was like, are you fucking kidding me? Everything was illegal they did. And even what I did wasn't even a crime. They claimed obstruction of a police officer because they said I lied to them, that they asked, do you have any illegal weapons? And I said, no, because I had a little tiny pocket knife. and that wasn't illegal. And then they arrested me. They said I had an illegal knife, and the knife wasn't illegal. And they asked to search me, and I said no, and they searched me anyway. And they pulled me out of my car for no reason, and the whole thing was just a bunch of bullshit. So they were like, you know, and the difference was the other case, that's why I've always said don't get arrested in Las Vegas, because the city attorney only deals with minor misdemeanors. So to them, they're not going to drop anything. The district attorney deals with murder and shit like that. So when he gets a little case like he got of mine, they probably looked at it. Not only did they look at it and say, you know, I could have fucking sued the department or at least made a complaint, but I made a complaint before and it didn't make a difference. So I'm like, whatever. But not only did they see that, but also they're like, well, you know, this is a bullshit case and we have, you know, actual real cases to deal with. But nothing happens to the cops, of course. They get away with whatever they want. But the other case went to the city attorney, and it was an obstruction of an officer, which was a bullshit case too. It's a minor misdemeanor. And my point is that they didn't let me out on personal recognizances, and it was the first time I was arrested in Nevada, and it wasn't even nothing. And I think the reason why, and they were letting people out with, and I don't think this, you know, I think it should be legal, but they actually take this seriously. I mean, there were felony drug charges. There were like felony crystal meth possession and shit like that people got personal recognizances, and they had been arrested before. And I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, maybe it was because they were filming and they wanted to show, oh yeah, you know, and they were tourists. That's probably why too. They were tourists and they wanted to show, hey, if you aired on TV, oh, look, we're, you know, and they tried to show how nice they were. So that's probably why. But the reality, so basically the reality is not what they showed on TV. Anyway, because I didn't get personal recognizances. And in Massachusetts, it was either personal recognizances or like $25 bail. It was, you know, for minor shit. The most amount I ever had was $500. And that was for something way more serious, even though, you know, it got taken care of in court. But, you know, before you go to court, despite what they say, you're assumed guilty until not proven innocent, but not having enough evidence to prove you guilty. So, back to the whole juvenile thing. So I don't know if my father ever hit me hard enough where, you know, as hard as he could, except for, I mean, there were a couple times. But I'm assuming he could hit pretty hard, and, you know, but it got to the point where he knew that, okay, like when I was 17 and he hit me, I was ready to fight him. And my mother, you know, got in the middle of it. I remember it was Super Bowl. It was the day of a Super Bowl, actually. I actually even know who won that year. So that's the last time he hit me. Now, I would never get grounded or anything like that. I can't remember getting grounded. I think the only time I technically got grounded was when I got suspended from school, and he just said, you can't go out while you're during the school hours or something. I don't know. Which I ended up going out anyway because I babysat these two little girls that lived a couple doors down that my parents were friends with. She was a single mother, and my parents were friendly with her, and I used to babysit them, and the little girl loved me. And it's funny because I saw them on Facebook, and one of them is, I think, the exact same age as my fiance now. It's weird, but I saw one, maybe it was MySpace, it was that long ago, But I sent a message because they were so little. The littlest one, who was really cute, I doubt she even remembered. But I sent a message, and I tried to mention the place and her mom, and figuring that she'd go ask her mom and maybe reply, and she didn't reply. So maybe she didn't get the message, because I know if it was Facebook, you usually don't see, if you're not friends with somebody, you won't see the message. I've gotten messages where I wasn't friends with somebody and I didn't even notice I got a message from them till way later. So it might have been that, who knows? But it was just weird to see, you could see their main picture, and it's like these two little girls I used to babysit for, and they're like all grown up. They're like girls I would date now or something. I mean, I wouldn't date them because I would still see them as those little girls. But I mean, they're, around the age of girls. It's just weird. Anyway, that's a whole nother kind of getting off topic here. But that's part of the reason why, I look at kids or teenagers especially, and I got so frustrated that I felt like I was trapped. And the reason why I'm telling my story, which I talked a little about it before, but not much, but is to show or relate to how some of these kids may feel, because they don't choose to be here. One quote from Stefan Molyneux, who's to me, he's a hit or miss type guy. Sometimes I can't stand him. Sometimes I think he does really well. But it's more the stuff I really like, to be honest, is just more what I call the mindless stuff, when somebody calls with like a relationship question or something, and he gives his, he thinks he's the expert psychologist or whatever, philosopher, and gives his, of course, his voice makes him sound more credible too, but I haven't heard a lot of one of the things that pisses me off is you see his episodes, right? And I only see the ones on YouTube just because I usually listen at work for something to listen to. I wouldn't listen to him outside of work. But I can't, anything streaming is blocked. So YouTube is not, for whatever reason. So what I usually do is I'll listen to YouTube documentaries, or I'll find something long to listen to, so I don't have to, keep going in there while I'm working and changing what I'm listening to. I'll just, put something on that's like an hour or a couple hours and listen to it, or, find some playlist of stuff or something like that. So one thing he did say, and I like his stance on kids, but as I was saying, there's like 10 to 15 shows in a row, and I was saying on YouTube, I don't know what's on his actual other applications that he's on, and I'm sure he's on a bunch, but it's all about Trump, Hillary. I mean, and this is a guy who calls himself an anarchist, and he's so involved in the election and loves Trump, and he's more of I would look at him as more of the conservative. I'm sorry. I can't, and maybe it's more of, okay, well, I'm looking at things based on this is how society is, as opposed to how you want society to be. However, and from what I've heard, people have said he's great and whatever, but that was more his old stuff, and that he's changed a lot, and maybe that's the case. But I haven't heard a lot of stuff that has to do with anarchism that I agree with that he said. I just haven't heard him really talk a lot about it, to be honest, because he's always talking about Trump and shit like that. And then I'll go and find calls that he does, which are entertaining. But I mean, I'm not, you know, it doesn't, I don't really get anything out of it as far as knowledge or anything like that. I just get entertained. You know, a girl will call up and talk about her relationship, and he'll give his philosophical analysis and yell at them and tell them how he's right based on philosophy, and how philosophy is all based off facts and whatever, none of it's opinion and whatever. But one of the things that he did say is, you know, and one of the things that I agree with him on to a point, because I don't think he goes far enough as far as freedom when it comes to kids and non-discipline and stuff like that. But that kids don't choose to be where they are, meaning that kids don't choose to be born to their parents. Kids don't choose to be born at all. So when you have a kid, you chose to have that kid. They had no choice in the matter, and they can't leave. They're stuck there. So if they're in a bad or fucked up situation, there's not a lot that they can do about it. So people have to keep that in mind when, you know, and the whole power relationship, or almost going back to the boss, you know, employee relationship, you control their life, and or you at least have the power to control their life, and they know that. And it's like an unfair, you know, I know that you support them, but at the same time, you made the decision to have them in the first place. So I want to focus more on teens, because like I said, when you get to younger ages, it's hard to, you know, I find it hard to look at, you know, self-ownership and say, you know, when do you say somebody can make a consensual choice of anything because they own themselves? And some of that gets into shit that I don't even want to get into. And I don't know, and I don't have kids, and that's something I'll have to, I guess, you know, having kids would help me to, I guess, see that differently, or see it from another side, because right now I'm seeing it from the kids' side still. And especially from the teenager side. But even as, you know, 8, 9, 10, I remember all these things as well. So, but at least with teenagers, you know, first of all, they have, regardless of what people say, I mean, they used to get married at 13 and 14. I mean, there's a reason why puberty starts around that time, that, you know, 13 and 14-year-olds can have kids, or 12, even 12. It depends. I mean, some girls, their puberty starts at 8, but I think that's more from these chemicals that they're fucking putting in bottles and food and shit like that. I honestly believe it has something to do with that, because I believe that there was a study that the age had gone up. I mean, how you know, all studies are, I think, skewed, but still, you know, as far as I knew, most girls, it would, you know, 12, 13, 14, at least by 14. And I never heard anybody at 8 or 9 until recently. Somebody that, because I don't know if she wants me to say it, but just girls I know that are adults now that have told me that they have and their friends were too at that age. And I'm like, really? I never fucking heard that before. And they're significantly younger than me. So like 8 to 10 years younger. So that makes a lot of sense with the, you know, the chemicals and the things like that. But that's a whole nother issue. But this whole the discipline thing, and I mentioned schools. So of course I believe that government schools shouldn't exist. But if they are going to exist, the discipline in schools, especially now with the police, and we've talked about the police and how, I mean, they're arresting elementary school kids for ridiculous things. They're handcuffing them. They're doing all this shit. But they're getting them ready, telling them, hey, this is what your future is going to be like, because we're going to, you know, have so many laws that basically everybody's going to get arrested. But the freedoms, first of all, that kids in government schools have, if you add that in, so you have parents, you have the government, and now you have police that are there, and you have a school that wants to teach you discipline as well as a teenager. Now, when you're younger, I still don't think schools should teach discipline, period. But when you're younger, it's a lot different, although I'm not supporting that neither. But just focusing on teens, once you hit high school, you know, you're 14, and really once you hit, you know, I would say 13, because if we're talking teenagers, we'll say 13, because that's a teenager is 13. So you've had 13 years of your life where your parents supposedly were instilling values in you and bringing you up and all of those things that happened during those years of being a parent and parenting your kids, regardless of the parenting style, that at a certain point, I believe that, and I know people are totally going to disagree with me, but if anything, I believe at least at minimum that at 13, you should be able to do whatever you want to do. Now, I know right away people are going to say, that's fucked up, 13-year-olds. Look at, well, first of all, what's been happening over the past at least 20 years, if not longer, is that kids are being babied more. And I played that clip. So my grandfather fought in World War II when he was 14. So I guess he looked a lot older and he lied about his age. And back then, you know, luckily, they didn't have the tracking that they have now. So he lied about his age and he fought in World War II when he was 14. But that's okay because it was back then. But what is the difference? And there really isn't. And the same thing where you could say people got married. Well, but people died at, you know, whenever. And I know there's things that people learn and things change for the good based on that. And I'm not saying that 13-year-olds should be getting married. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they should be treated with more respect and more like adults than having to ask permission from their parents you have parents that will punish a kid just for disrespecting them. They're being forced to go to schools where they're being disciplined there, sometimes to the point of getting arrested. Now, it's like making something illegal. You know, if you try to stop a kid from doing something, they're going to do it. And I know this is not a popular parenting method with people like who I had on the show, Dana Martin, where basically her kids can do whatever they want. And I believe in that. And I know there, and that's where, like I said, depending on the show that you're listening to, you may or may not, you know, agree with what I'm saying. But I'm consistent when it comes to freedom. You could say whatever you want about me. You could say that I'm not consistent when it comes to freedom, but I am. I mean, it's a fact. You listen to any show, and I'm always consistent. And I always take the route of freedom. And I believe in self-ownership. And I believe, you know, I'm going to say, you know, teenagers, because that's what we're focusing on. But people own themselves. Parents do not own their kids, first of all. And they have to learn that. And again, I hate to be somebody who tells people what they have to do. But when it comes to owning people, there's certain things that, you know, I'll tell people, you know, maybe not have to do, but that it's wrong for them to. I should more say that, because really people don't have to do that. They can say they own their kids, and the law would probably support them. So, and same with killing somebody. I mean, I could say you have to not kill somebody. I think that's a double negative, but you could kill somebody. It's just, it's not right, and you're going to go to jail unless, you know, it's in self-defense, which is fine. But when it comes to kids, part of the reason now, and this is all by design in my opinion, is kids have been so babied. And if you look at why, and I was listening to another show where still their parenting method that they agreed with didn't go far enough, but they were definitely saying that parents were going too far. But they talked about some movie in the 80s, and I didn't remember it by name, but I remembered a similar movie with a kid that got kidnapped or something like that. And then they mentioned something else from the 80s that I forget what it was, but I remember hearing about it when I was a kid. And it was back when they had mentioned, you know, a lot less TV. Like now there's so many channels, there's internet, there's, you know, video games, whatever. There's so many things to do. That's why if you look at ratings compared to 50 years ago or 40 years ago, it's just totally different. I mean, you're successful at such a lower amount. So, and you have a higher population too. But you used to just have, the majority of the people had just the main, you know, 5 channels or whatever, and some UHF stations. And of course cable came, but even with cable initially it didn't have, you know, 200 channels or whatever they have now. It maybe had like 30, or most people had, you know, maybe 30, if that. So people saw this shit. And the same thing that I did a show on either last week or the week before about putting things in perspective applies in this situation. Because when you put things in perspective, because I guess there was a couple kidnapping movie that might have been based on a true story or something, and then something else or whatever. So 1 or 2 kids that get kidnapped, And people see that, and it's like, oh my God, the whole fucking, the chances of your kids getting kidnapped are now whatever, just because one or two kids got kidnapped. Even though nothing changed, what changed is your perception. And your perception is not reality. So, because of that, not just that, what they had said, but in general, because of media, government media, just like now, the way that they show things or don't show things or don't put things in perspective, people, it changes the way not only people think, but the way they act. Because, you know, you watch the local news and again, you see a murder happen every night or something, and you live in a city of 3 million people, the metro area or whatever, or 2.5 million people, you know, 365 people that got killed in a metro area of 2.5 million isn't too many. And of course, a lot of them are, you know, the majority are not random neither. So how much does that put you in danger? Well, basically, it doesn't. So point being is that because they don't put things in perspective, they got totally scared. I remember in the 80s, like somebody put a razor blade in an apple and there was a whole big thing. Make sure you check your candy. I think the whole ritual of Halloween is ridiculous. I had a couple people ring my doorbell yesterday. I, of course, didn't answer the fucking door. I didn't buy any candy anyway. But the whole, there was a whole big scare. Halloween, oh my God, you know, like one kid or something. It was either one or two. It was like the same guy, I think, and maybe a couple kids cut themselves or whatever. You're not going to die from a razor blade in the apple, but you could like slice your tongue open. That would suck. Anyway, or I mean, people could inject fucking candy with shit anyway if they really wanted to. I mean, look how people don't look at the safety of America. You know, if you have a country where people are willing to go to strangers' doors and fucking get candy, and you could easily like inject fucking something that would kill you into candy and not even notice, because you could have a thin ass fucking needle. And, you know, how many problems are there really on Halloween of people getting hurt by candy, if any? So it's just so ridiculous that, yeah, they show the minority of things that happen, all the bad things, none of the good things, and it alters people's perception because they don't think of things like I said, like the amount of the population, for example, is what one of the things I went into, or, you know, the percentage of how often this or how likely or the probability of something. They don't look at that. They just see a story on TV and freak out. So you have, if you look at 13-year-olds now, and also people's perceptions have even been altered about that. Like I said, my grandfather in World War II was 14 and went to war. And I bet you if the people that knew that he was 14 later, maybe not the people in the military or whatever, because I think he would have gotten in trouble, but or that he was going, probably didn't even think it was a big fucking deal. Because he was a bit, you know, it was based on his size. I guess he was, you know, full grown. He had a beard already, whatever. So they didn't even look at that as a big fucking deal. But now you have a 14-year-old going, you know, joining the army or something or to fight or whatever. They probably would look at it as a big deal. So people said perception has been altered for the negative in many ways. Now, there's positive things, positive changes that have happened. Not a lot. I mean, something like slavery, where people were looked at as property, and now a lot of people would say they still are looked at that way. But because there's still racism, and yes, there still is racism, but essentially we're all slaves of the government. We're all giving, well, we're not all giving our money, because some people don't pay any taxes legally because they're getting checks from the government. They're getting taxes instead of paying taxes. But, you know, I'm having 25% of my money stolen from the government without my consent. So people, you know, kids are more immature, I think, at those ages than they were. And I don't think that's a good thing. Now, it is what it is, and people have the right to raise their kids the way they want. However, at the same time, when you're talking about ownership of people, and if you believe you can do whatever you want to your kid, and because you feel that you own them, then that's fucked up. I mean, you don't own your kid. And what is the point and the purpose of all of this shit? There was another thing that I saw of parents spying on their kids, you know, going through their diaries, going through their phones, seeing where they're going. Do they think that they're gonna somehow, how often is this gonna happen? So you somehow save your kid from doing something that they don't end up doing because you go through their shit. That's not going to happen. And I'll tell you why. You may stop them for a night or a specific time, but you're not going to stop them in the long term, because all you're going to do, one, is piss them off. And they might be, you know, you don't know how that affects them later in life and damages them or whatever. I don't know. Because it does. You know, you feel like you can't trust people or whatever. But they're going to do what they're going to do. Now, you can be a parent who develops a relationship of trust and lets them do what they want to do, but be involved and advise them and tell them, well, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think you should do this, but I'm not going to stop you because you're going to do what you're going to do. Or you can just try to stop them and lock them in their room and whatever. And then you have either they go and do it anyway somehow. They sneak out, or they do it another time, or they go crazy later and fuck up their life and do a bunch of crazy things, or, you know, whatever. So there's, you know, it's almost similar to drugs in a way, of the being illegal compared to being illegal, and the positives of it just being legal. Even though, again, if there were no positives, I would still say it should be legal because of the self-ownership part. And I think as a teenager, once you hit, you know, your teenage years, and before then is a whole nother story, but we'll say for the purposes of, you know, just talking about teenagers, to say that you don't own yourself by that point is unfair. I mean, you're fully developed. Most people are physically. Now, I know they say, well, your brain's not fully developed, and men still can grow. So, you know, what I mean is they've gone through puberty, even though they can, you know, get taller or whatever until I think early 20s. But most girls stop growing at like 14. The majority of them, they stop growing pretty young. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason why, again, you know, girls are fertile I think fertility peaks at something in girls' 20s. So again, I'm not saying I'm more a proponent for having kids later, but there's reasons for all these things. And I'm not saying that 14-year-olds should be having kids neither. I think teenagers that have kids are stupid, but I do believe that you have the right to go out if you want to and do pretty much what you want to do when you're a teenager. And this fucking arbitrary law of 18, and then you have on one of these shows, the girl was 17 and her mother's yelling at her, telling her what she can do. And, I don't know 17 and how many months, but she had to be at least 17 in 1 month. So what? In 11 months, though, it's totally different. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it doesn't do anything positive. Now, I'm not saying that people should just just not act like they don't care and be like, oh, just go do whatever you want to do. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, they have the right as a human being, a fully grown human being, to what is the harm. And really, if you look at it, I mean, there's this whole fear built up that, what is the harm of them going out and, they might do drugs, but they're going to do that if they're going to do that, or they might, have sex, which they're going to do if they're going to do. And kids are having sex. Kids, why, again, why are, if kids weren't, not kids, but if teenagers weren't meant to have sex, then why are they getting their periods? Why are they able to have kids? Why do teenage boys' hormones, are out of control or whatever? All of these things. But it's okay for the mother to be a big whore and, bring all these guys into the house, a single mother. And that's okay. But for her daughter to have a boyfriend and be in one relationship that she's, a sexual relationship that maybe she's been in for a long time, and say she's 15 and he's 17, then that's not okay. And then you have the statutory rape thing where this is ridiculous. I know in Nevada it's 16 unless they changed it, but where an 18-year-old has sex with a 16-year-old and all of a sudden it's statutory rape, or a 15-year-old, which is just insane. But what is the fear? And is it really fear? Like this one mother was saying, oh, it's because I love you guys and I don't want you to make the same mistakes. Well, one, weren't you parenting all these years? And what is spying and stopping kids from doing what they want to do? How is that better than developing a relationship based on trust? Based on they know they can tell you whatever they're doing because you're not going to punish them or ground them or whatever. And then people try to do that. Well, we're going to stop our kids doing something from punishing them. None of that shit is going to stop anything. That's the whole point. That's my comparison or analogy to drugs. It's like people that do drugs are going to do drugs. You're not going to stop them whether it's legal or illegal. The majority, I'd say about 99%. You may have 1 or 2% that like, well, if it's illegal, maybe I'll try it or something once. But it's a very small amount. Most people are not going to, if drugs become legal, say, oh, drugs are legal, I'm going to go do them now. No. Why does the U.S. have the biggest problem with alcohol than I think any other country, at least compared to Europe, because Europe doesn't make a big deal about it. And that's the whole thing. By trying to stop your kids, you drive them to want to do these things. And again, I'm not saying not being an active parent. That's the whole point, is being an active parent. And I think being more so active than if you than when you try to stop them from doing things, because you want to talk to them about all this stuff and give them your opinion and give them your experiences, and then let them make their own fucking decisions based on, you know, being able to talk to them. Because how can you have a relationship with your kid if you're snooping on them, or you're grounding them, or you're not letting them date or go out or do anything? And how can they have a happy, you know, teenage years and be able to enjoy those? And, you know, the majority of people get through their teenage years fine. That's another thing, the fallacy that they don't. Because everybody that's alive today was once a teenager. So it really is, I think, making things worse. Now, not only that, again, is the fact that you don't own your kids. They own themselves. It's their body. I think I would say that there shouldn't be an age of consent. And I know saying that, people right away, oh my God. Now, I don't know, and I'm just saying that because I don't believe in government and laws and things like that. But that doesn't mean I think that, you know, young kids should be having sex. But I don't have any problem with teenagers having sex with other teenagers. I don't know how you, and that's why I said, you know, just talking about teenagers, because when it comes to younger kids, that's a whole nother thing. And that's the whole issue there, is how do you deal with that aspect of it? You know, the letting kids go out and hang out with their friends and go outside and play, you know, when you're talking about younger kids, and not giving them a bedtime. I mean, that's not things that are a big deal. But when it comes to, you know, the thing you worry about is, of course, the fucking sexual predators and whatever, and the people that get molested. But that's another thing that, you know, how many people has that? It's, I don't know. They make it sound like there's a huge amount of people that have been sexually molested, and that's something where I'd have to look at the statistics, and of course those aren't accurate because there's plenty of people that have never said anything. But that's what you worry about with that. But I want to go back to focusing on teenagers before we end the show. But when it comes down to it, how can they not feel, and I've talked to people about this, and I felt like this, not feel like you're trapped, like you don't have any rights, like you don't have any freedoms. If you not only have, like I said, your school, the police, your parents should be the ones that at least are there for you, not just in that sense, but, you know, parents are teaching kids or bringing up kids to be obedient and not question things, and not because you just follow orders. You know, your parents tell you do this, do that. You watch TV shows. They ask for, can I, Dad? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I? It's fucking. It's kind of sickening in a way. Like you're asking to do everything. Like they're. fine. If little kids, whatever, that's a different story. But you're talking about teenagers that are asking to do whatever to go out and oh, well, I want to call from the parents. I want to know what's going on there. I want to know, what are you going to do about it? Like, seriously. And if you actually trusted, or were a parent prior to them becoming a teenager, one, why would you have to worry? Because I would think you'd have built a relationship of trust, and that they would tell you these things, and you wouldn't need to limit or try to limit, what they do. Now, if they're, if they start getting arrested and stuff that's a whole nother thing too, because you look at kids are getting arrested for ridiculous things. I mean, kids are getting arrested for sexting. Some girl got arrested for having a picture of herself, a naked picture she took of herself on her phone. They're getting arrested for walking to the park. If they're too young. So even that, if they're doing bad things, and the only thing I look at as bad is I look at teens the same way. I think that I would look at adults as long as they're not killing somebody or assaulting or stealing property, or, if they're doing things like that, well, if they're killing somebody, you're not really going to be able to do much. But if they're getting arrested for just randomly beating people or breaking in and stealing shit or doing, robberies and stuff like that, okay, then that's a whole nother story. But assuming that they're not doing that, and I know people say that, or at least some people say that what your kid does doesn't reflect on you, and people are worried about. Now, I don't think you should worry about it as far as who gives a fuck what people think, but I think that it does reflect on you in a sense. Because I think that what you've done to that point, as far as raising them, or what they've seen, because not always, because things can happen when you're not there. And I understand that. And I understand that parents, a lot of them, their heart's in the right place, but their mind is not. And that the things that they do, they feel like they're doing the right thing. Because, certain things can happen. But that's more, that's where I would be not restrictive to when I have a younger kid, but I probably would worry about shit like that. So I wouldn't have, when the kid is still around an age where they're not old enough to be alone, I'd be very careful if I left them with somebody or something like that, or, things like that, because that's the last thing you hear about this stuff, and that's what happens. You hear about this stuff and you think that, half the population, you got to worry about molesting your kids, which isn't the reality. See, even something like that has, even some of these things get to me to an extent. So I don't know. Basically that's all the time we have left. And I even went over, and I wish I was more prepared for tonight, but it's just, I feel bad for teenagers, because I remember what I went through, and with me, it was different in that, I wasn't really restricted on where I could go and what I could do and things like that. It was, my father would use things against me, like you can't use my car or you can't whatever. And that's how I felt like I was in I felt like I was in a prison or whatever, because the way he would act towards me and treat me with things and hold things over my head. And basically, if I didn't have a car, it's like, how the fuck am I going to get anywhere to do anything anyway? But he was never really restrictive on I didn't get grounded and that I couldn't go places and things like that. It was more like just being an asshole to be an asshole type thing. And that's a whole nother story. So I just understand, and I know a lot of kids who had it worse than me, and I've seen that too, and I've talked to kids about it as well, and how they were damaged by, not having any privacy, not being able to have a life as a teenager, and enjoy that time, because their parents trying to stop, basically everything that they did. So, and I think it's getting worse because of government media and government itself, really, because they're the ones I think that control all that. And government schools, police in schools, police in general. And no one gives a shit. That's the main thing, that kids that are teenagers care. And then, as I said, as they get older, once they turn like 21, they don't give a fuck anymore. They don't really think back. So there's nobody really fighting for the rights of teenagers, who I think when it comes to a control standpoint, they have so many different levels of control. And for me, that was just a frustrating thing. And the discipline to just be disciplined. Like I started talking about the hat thing, and that I ended up going home over, and I got detention because I wouldn't take off my hat, because I'm like, why? There's no reason. There's no valid reason to not wear my hat. And we didn't have a gang issue neither. So it had nothing to do with that. And that's stupid anyway. But it was nothing to do with that. It was a respect thing. It's, well, you can't wear your hat indoors because of respect. And everything's about respect and old tradition. And that's why I reject ridiculous traditions as well, because of things like that. But anyway, again, that's all the time we have for tonight. We will be back hopefully tomorrow, but I am not 100% sure. But either way, we will be playing something because we are on 24/7. So you can tune in at any time on the live stream from Spreaker or the Nonpartisan Liberty for All website, nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. I appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight, and any night you tune in. And of course, if you go to the website, there is a donate button. I rarely mention it because nobody ever donates. But if you'd like to donate to the show, you can always donate, because we're 100% self-funded by me and my job, and I haven't made any money yet. Not that that's my goal, but hey, it would be nice to make a little money, but that's fine. So thanks again, everybody, and have a good night.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' command.
What's happening, Heather? That's bored. Green-light, yes, sir.
Sir, I need more time.
We have no time. Are you going to give that order or not?
Sir, please.
You're too naive to see the truth. There's no bringing in born.
We will defend these police officers.
listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the enforcement. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan liberty for all. It is November 1st, 2016, and we're coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern on the Nonpartisan Liberty for All media and radio network, which now runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can listen live on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com to the live stream. And to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. Of course, you can listen to the archives at any time, but you can listen to the newest show on the archives for most of those immediately following the show. It posts up there pretty quick. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote self-ownership and the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedoms, exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And in that, just so everybody is clear, I do consider myself anti-government and anti-police. Now, that doesn't mean I hate the people within the government. I don't really hate anybody. Hate, it has nothing to do with it. What they're doing is wrong, but there's no, I don't hate the government or the police. And when I say anti-government and anti-police, what I mean is that I don't believe they should exist. Now, that doesn't mean I don't believe that those people shouldn't exist. I believe that those positions should not exist. I believe in an organized society, but without rulers. So I should actually add that to my intro to clarify to people, because a lot of time with what she's doing now with a show, whereas in the past, I think that she was on, I guess it would depend on the show, but on Free Talk Live, she was kind of in the background. You had three hosts there. So she didn't have much control, although she did get a chance to add to stuff and she did a good job. And then all her other shows were with co-hosts. And this one, she finally gets to do whatever she wants. And I don't interfere with that. I don't, she produces that show. It was totally her idea. I don't, really, I haven't said anything. Although she did ask me for my feedback, which I did want to give her, but I don't really have much negative feedback that I can think of off the top of my head. She really does a great job, and I think that she helps bring more listeners to the network, and I think she gives something different for people to listen to, because it's still in the vein of freedom and liberty, but it's like an abstract. I can't even explain it. It's more abstract, and she puts a lot of creativity uses her creativity a lot within the show to just come up with all different types of things and ideas to talk about. And so if you haven't heard the show, at least, check out an episode. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Actually, I'm playing the whole, she's done 21 shows now. Her last show yesterday featured Andrew Mercer of Puke and the Gang, and that's a 2-part show. So next Monday will be the second half of that show. But I'm currently playing, as we're 24 hours, all of the shows. So we're in the middle of a marathon, I guess, of the Illumination Hour. So being that most people are not staying up 24 hours a day, I'm definitely going to play it for at least another day, because it's, 21 hours of shows, plus I added some important clips in there. But getting back to, as far as people that I hear out there, before we get to our main topic tonight, which is teens and their rights, and how parents, I think, abuse their rights along with the government and the whole system, the system as a whole. And what happens is, when you're a teenager, you try to fight against the system. And then after you turn 18, or as you get, not even 18, but maybe, 21, and you kind of join the adult crowd and you don't give a fuck anymore. And you're like, hey, those annoying, teenagers. But for somebody like me, I think because of what I feel I went through as a teenager, I will never forget that. And I want to focus on, it depends which show you're listening to. And really, I try to cover a lot of different things that relate to the government, because I've said this before, you never know what is going to get to somebody. If you do a story on whatever, it could be anything. It might be something that might resonate with them and cause them to start questioning things. And that's the ultimate goal, because as I've said before, the truth is on mine and whoever agrees with me side, which I don't hear a lot of people that agree with me, to be honest. And that's why I mention Larkin Rose a lot, because he's really the only person that I hear that agrees with me. Now, it's not that he heard me and agreed with me. He was doing his stuff way before me. So I don't want to, I want to make sure that's clear. I've played his stuff, and I've learned from listening to some of his stuff, kind of expanded on some things. But in general, I had most of those ideas before listening to Larkin Rose. It just so happened that I already had those ideas. But he was around way before I even had those ideas. But I didn't learn them from listening to him, although I can say that he's helped me to think about more better ways to get the ideas out there, because he's great at doing that. He's a great speaker when it comes to talking about the government and the truth about the government and what it really is. And, I've listened to everything on YouTube that he has out there that I could find for the most part. A lot of it's redundant, because like when he does a speech, he did like a tour, and this guy's a guy who's not getting paid. I don't think he got paid for any of it. He might have got paid for some of it, but if he did, it was like nothing. It's not like he is making all this money or anything like that. They might have paid his expenses to get to wherever he was going to or something. And it's sad, because if he was anybody else, if he was talking about, if he was a Republican or a Democrat or a progressive or a socialist or any of those things, he'd probably be a millionaire. I mean, he's that good, and I don't want to sit here and kiss his ass. I only say that because I believe that. And I'm not somebody who gives a lot of props to anybody. I don't really, there's stuff I like that people do. Very rarely now do I say I'm a fan of the person. And even with Larkin Rose, I mean, I don't know him personally. Mark Edge had asked him for me to come on the show during his retirement, and then it seemed like he was unretired, so he had asked again. And really, I was looking for his email address because Mark had copied me on it, and I was going to send him an email about playing his stuff, doing like a Larkin Rose day and just looping his stuff, just to get an okay from him, which I'm sure that would be no problem. And then I thought about maybe asking him again to come on the show, but I don't want to rehash all the same shit that everybody else asks him and all the same questions and whatever. Now, I could come at it from a totally different angle, and I've tried to do that in the past with certain people. A lot of the people I had on were the first that I really got deep into their story, because I like to really get deep into somebody's story of how they got into stuff and whatever. But Larkin Rose is just so, from his interviews and all the shows he's been on, from his own speeches, I mean, there's just so much information out there on him that if I did an interview about, how he found the ideas of liberty and went through his life and whatever, it probably, wouldn't be all that great, because all that stuff is out there. So I'd have to come at it from a totally different angle. And it probably would be more of a, do you want to come on and discuss stuff with me or something like that? But a lot of the people I did that interviews with, they've been on shows and stuff like that, and people know who they are. But I tried to get really into detail. Like, I did 2 to 3 hour interviews with some the people that would actually allow me to, and they were very interesting. And I kept going with where it took me and my own curiosity about them and how it related to freedom and liberty and stuff like that. And that's why I think if you look at some of the old interviews, even though the sound quality kind of sucks, some of them are very interesting. Now, I'm not saying I did a great job, as far as I think a little stiff still. That sounds bad. But I mean, as far as my voice and whatnot, but as far as the interviewee giving a really good interview, because I got deep into them personally and how it related to the focus of the show, that it was interesting, especially, Daryl Perry of Free Talk Live and Ellen Ball / Stallone of I only laugh when I say that just because she's listed under Ellen Ball under the interviews, but she goes by Ellen Stallone, and I think she told me why. It's a long story. But anyway, she's the host of the Illumination Hour, which is on every Monday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. And people seem to really like the show. I think she does a great job, and she's very creative. And I think she's really happy with, now this is just, of course, my opinion from talking with her and listening to her show, is that she's happy. And I have in the past. I mean, we've done other shows where not teens specifically, but, you know, kids and kids' rights and stuff like that. And I want to focus on that because nobody fights for, especially teens. Nobody's fighting for their rights. Because again, I mean, they're probably, you want to talk about oppressed people when it comes to control. Maybe oppression isn't the right word, but when it comes to controlled people, teenagers are the most controlled. And at the same time, they have the mental capacity to realize it. It's not, you know, when you're a younger kid and your parents are telling you what to do and all that stuff, most kids under 10 or whatever, they rebel a little, but not like teenagers do, because they feel like, hey, I know what I'm doing. Now, I'm not saying all teenagers know what they're doing, but they have the mental capacity to make these decisions, I believe. And I think as a parent, you should still help to guide those and be involved. But ultimately, I think it's up to them. And I know a lot of people are going to totally disagree with me and have in the past when I get into this. But it really, it's one of those things that's like taboo to talk about, or that maybe not taboo, depends how, you know, that's more, I guess, younger age kids. But to talk about, it's like talking about the police, like for politicians to talk about, you know, the rights of teenagers and having more freedom and stuff like that. It's something they'll never talk about. They'll never mention, because what do they give a fuck? They can't vote for them anyway. So they could care less. Now, they are future voters, so they should think about that. But nobody gives a fuck about the rights of teenagers. And I'm talking about, you know, 13 to 17, even really to, you know, 21. But they care a little more when you're 18 because of the fact that you can vote. But most 18-year-olds don't vote anyway, as I mentioned. I never voted. I had that one sort of vote that I mentioned just to be completely honest, but it didn't really count. It was like a substitute. I was at a different polling place, and I really didn't give a fuck anyway. So, and that would be the only time, and that was, 2012. So, yeah, I don't vote because the whole fucking system is rigged. And not rigged like Donald Trump says, rigged against Trump, like fake votes and shit like that. It's rigged, like I've talked about, by the media and the parties and whatever. So he's just like, oh, well, there's bias against me. It's rigged against me. Well, in a way it is, but it's not about you. It's about whoever's running against Hillary, because the powers that be want Hillary to get in there so they can go more towards a socialist, communist oligarchy where all the people on the top, all the powers that be, will sit on the top while everybody else lives in poverty, essentially. So, anyway, we'd be happy to